on at Easy Living Interiors. Cork, Waterford, Navan, Naas, Sandyford and Drogheda. Sale extended till Sunday.
Discover the Bosch laundry range at Power City. Achieve perfect washing results thanks to the Bosch Intelligent Dosing System IDOS. Now with a free 5-year warranty. For more information, go to powercity.ie or call in store today.
Take steps to improve the energy efficiency of your home. Generate as much as 80% of your electricity requirements with solar PV panels from Energlaze. SEAI grants of up to €3,800 also available. Every upgrade you make makes a difference.
You ain't shit! I wish I was 50 years younger and I'd kick your ass.
Well, fans can be the harshest critics, you know.
And they often are.
A wife is often the harshest critic of her husband.
I thought I was invincible. That's what you're trained to believe as a sports person.
There was 4 million people in Ireland who knew much more about managing football teams than I did. When it comes to music, I can spoof with the best.
Your sporting career is the best time you'll have, and you know you have to hang on to it for as long as you like, because everything else is pretty crappy.
And this is not lies. Stephen Rothschild has never spoken to Jim McGuinness in his life.
You're very welcome along to our Saturday panel. It is a special Saturday panel brought to you today with thanks to welovecycling.ie, powered by Škoda. And we're talking cycling, not professional cycling for once, but what it's like to be a cyclist in Ireland today, whether you're cycling to work, whether you're on the commute, or whether you're one of those weekend warriors. What type of country is Ireland for cyclists? We'd love to get your thoughts. 53106 is the text number. You can leave a comment on any of our social channels as well. I'm joined in studio by Richie Oakley, who is editor of the Times Ireland edition and an avid cyclist as well. Verona Murphy, who's president of the Irish Road Haulage Association, and Shane Coleman, presenter of Newstalk Breakfast. Welcome to the big show, Shane.
Thank you. It's an ambition of mine to be here, so it's fantastic.
Well, you're welcome. It's great to have a professional finally alongside us here. So we're going to talk about, look, there's a lot to get through, I think, when it comes to cycling in Ireland. Richie, is Ireland a good place for cyclists?
It should be. So I think the answer is yes and no. I think Ireland is really struggling when it comes to appealing to people who are young, inexperienced and elderly people. If we want to increase the number of people cycling, which is what every country in the world needs to do, it's what every country in the world is taking seriously. Ireland isn't really taking it seriously. We spend about 1% of transport funding on cycling. We don't have any of the infrastructure. We don't have the facilities. A lot of it is token gestures, bad planning, and difficulties like that. And also, there's a growing hostility towards cyclists. We're somehow seen as a nuisance, when in fact, we're just people trying to get to work. We're the same as everyone else. We're just cycling along. And I've certainly noticed that there's an increased frustration. But in reality, cycling is the answer to so many of society's ills that we just have to start promoting it.
Well, when I ask you then, is Ireland a good place to cycle, and you say yes and no, what's the yes?
Yeah, so I love cycling. In Dublin in particular, I love cycling. It's flat, it's easy to get to work, it's quick, you can get around the place really easily. There's nice places to cycle, and in general, a lot of the time, it's okay. But then, I'm 40, I'm male, I'm a relatively experienced cyclist. If you're not those things and you're trying to cycle, so for example, we have a capital city where a child couldn't really cycle a bike. I think that's one of the saddest things. I'm just back from Copenhagen today, and you see kids cycling in the middle of the city centre with their parents 2 or 3 bike lanes behind, just telling them, look, be careful, cars pausing, waiting. There's a better driver behaviour towards cycling because there's a critical mass of cyclists in Copenhagen and in cities like this. Dublin is hosting a cycling conference pretty soon. Dublin dropped out of the top 20 cities. We're not in the top 20 cities for cycling anymore. Copenhagen, Utrecht, Malmo, Bordeaux, Tokyo, these are the types of cities doing the best practice. And the saddest thing is, these cities that are doing it really well and are getting all the benefits of a cycling culture in their cities, they're on our doorstep. You can grab a flight and you can go there. But nobody, certainly the guy who put the cycle track on the N11, he certainly has never been to Copenhagen.
What's your commute?
I think a lot of our city and planners, I go from Castleknock down through the Phoenix Park where there's an off-road cycle park. It's badly designed, that one, because the cars parked beside it and people walk in front of it. In fact, there was a fatal incident there where that was one of the factors involved. And then I cycle down the quays with the buses through the city centre. I then have to cross right over the Liffey, which is always a challenge. It tends in Dublin. You've got poor surfaces, you've got circuitous routes, you have to cross multiple lanes. And if you move out from the side of the road into the middle of the lane, you get a lot of people get frustrated with you, even though you're perfectly entitled to be there and you're protecting yourself as a cyclist. And also the thing you notice in Dublin a lot is people see bikes as things you have to overtake, when in fact we're moving along at more than the average speed. So we're not. So you get like buses overtake you, pull right in front of you, and you're just going like, where do these guys learn about bikes? All you have to do is wait behind us a lot of the time. And I think a lot of the confrontations between cyclists and motorists could be resolved if the motorists just waited behind until there was a chance to overtake. So you don't get a lot of time, you don't get a lot of patience from people, which is what you need. And the thing is, it's not me who should be able to cycle in the city centre. It's a kid, 10 years old, 12 years old. In places like Copenhagen, kids up till 10 will wear a helmet. From 10 on, they won't. They'll just cycle along. It's a normal activity. Here, when you say, oh, I'm a cyclist, I commute to work by bike, people kind of say, oh, you kind of take your life into your own hands. That's the saddest thing I've heard in a long time. And where's Dublin going? Building more roads for more cars, more congestion, air pollution, unhealthy people, sitting in boxes emitting fumes. And even if you move to cleaner cars, they're still powered by conventional electricity. So we just need to get to grips with this and just solve it, and we just need to go and look at other cities and just do exactly as they've done already.
Verona, what's the hauliers' problem with cyclists?
The biggest problem we have is we can't see them a lot of the time, and that is not a criticism of anybody, that is a fact. And I agree with absolutely everything Richie has said, and I think the biggest thing that has to change in Ireland in relation to cycling is attitude, and it's everybody's attitude. I mean, if we need further education, that is for sure, and we all need to understand. For instance, I, as a cyclist, I have a better understanding of what the issues are for the motorist, and as a motorist I'm far more sensitive to cyclists, and I think that's what everybody needs to come to that point. So when Richie said he takes a centre line, that's because he has to protect himself and has to ensure that nobody goes to overtake him because he's going to turn right. And as a truck driver, if I have to turn left in the city, whilst I may veer to the right and the cyclist is up on the inside of me like that, I can't see him. I can do my best, but the likelihood is I can't see him, and he doesn't understand I'm going to turn left. I might indicate, but he may think I've made a mistake. Like in Australia, and this is a dreadful signage that you would see, on the back of trucks what you see is overtaking side and then suicide. That's what you see on the back of the trucks, because if you're on the side, you're looking to, that's the indicator. We really have to come to a point. And you're right, the infrastructure, particularly Phoenix Park, wonderful cycle lane. You think the surface is dreadful, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So it deters people. I mean, I often come through the park and I see the cyclist out in the roadway. Yeah. So, we have a huge way to come. I'm delighted to hear of the Liffey cycle route. That's a long way off, though. It is something that's it's expected to be costing in the region of somewhere around 20 million. I'm not sure, have you been asked, or anybody that's actually a cyclist been asked about the development of it? Because the way you talk about crossing over the Liffey, it's grand to say it's going both directions, but the difficulty is crossing.
They are putting in a special crossing junction. It's not ideal.
So the Liffey cycle is going to be this 5 kilometre route, basically the length of the Liffey that will be a protected cycle route.
Yeah, and it'll connect up with the Phoenix Park and go on off down to the point. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then theoretically it should connect up there with ones going around the bay as well.
But again, you're really not to just urbanise it. I mean, cycling in the country is something that is huge, and I have to say, one of our biggest issues in rural Ireland is actually hedging and hedgerows, and the difficulty. One of our members recently was behind a tractor loaded with hay, high, right? He was behind it, minding his own business. As you say, he was going up a hill, and the hay on the trailer hit the bough of a tree. The bough of the tree fell down on the cyclist. The tractor driver had no indication. He couldn't see him. Wasn't his fault. He hit the bough injured the cyclist. The cyclist fractured his shoulder, broke 5 ribs. So it's stuff like that makes it dangerous.
All this sounds like all of this is somebody else's problem.
No, it's not someone else's problem. It's about joined up thinking. It's the fact that we do have problems, but they're solvable, and they're solvable through education. Now, Nathan, I'm not a critic of cyclists.
And also truck design. I mean, it's 2019. You should be able to design a truck that has particular cameras or mirrors which allows it to see down its left-hand side. And if a cyclist makes a mistake, I mean, you can educate cyclists all you will. You'll eventually get a point where a cyclist who's inexperienced will go down the inside of a truck turning left. And the fact that truck drivers can say now they can't see that, like, that's a design flaw that should be resolved.
Well, it's resolved through mirrors, Richie, and we have more mirrors than buses than any other vehicle. There is a mirror, but the reality is that there's also cameras. Right now, he can't be looking at the camera and driving the truck, checking this mirror. It's difficult. I'm not making an excuse. I'm trying to say that somebody on the inside has to be cognizant. And if it's a left-hand drive truck, in Ireland, left-hand drive trucks, there's 50% of them left-hand drive, even though they're Irish trucks, because we do the continent. You're paying for tolls on the left-hand side, so you drive a left-hand drive. All those things are not recognised. Now, look, I understand the frustration levels that you get out there. So the driver of a car or of a truck or a bus, they all think that they are more entitled because they've passed a test. You have the cyclist, whom they believe to be quite ignorant of the rules of the road, because they're saying, what did they do? How do we know they know?
Yeah.
There has to be a remedy to that.
Well, look, Shane, just on that then. Yeah. Like, this often ends up in cyclists against motorists.
Yeah.
Most cyclists are also motorists.
Drive as well.
Most of them drive and maybe are more aware. Like, cyclists, how much responsibility do they have to take? Are they taking enough responsibility for their behaviour on the road?
I don't really buy this argument that, and you do get it, like cyclists are reckless and they're crazy and they break all the... Like, I'm sorry, every driver breaks the rules of the road regularly. Breaks red lights, speeds and stuff. So I find it...
can't be punished for that.
But often aren't. And the reality is cyclists don't kill people. 15 cyclists died last year on the roads, 14 the year before. Cyclists are being killed on the road. Cyclists are not killing people on the road. Cars are.
It's funny now that you say that, because I spoke to a journalist today and she said to me she cycled to work yesterday, and when she cycles she feels like every car is out to get her. And when she's a pedestrian, she feels like every cyclist is out to get her.
I've really noticed it recently, because my little girl is out cycling with me on the road, and just the amount of times I have to scream at drivers just to slow down. It's incredible. Going back to the point though about what you do, I mean, as always in Ireland, we don't plan for these things. Cycling is an afterthought. It's an afterthought in everything. I think in 2017 we spent €1.50 per head of population on cycling in this country. €1.50. I mean, you wouldn't even buy a fucking light for the bike with €1.50. I mean, every bus or every bike lane is an afterthought. We're trying to cram it in. We're actually going to have to face up to it. If we're going to be Copenhagen, where 45% of people cycle to work or to school, if we are going to be like that, we are going to have to take space from cars. But that is the reality. And it's going to... Look, the classic example, sorry, just one last point. The classic example of if you build it, they will come, is the Grand Canal cycleway. I mean, anyone who has crossed... You'll be taken by the number of bikes on it. It is like a European city. And the reason it is because it's a dedicated, segregated cycleway. It works. If you build it, it will work and people will cycle.
And I don't disagree with that. And I think that we are a long way off those major cities, and we are going to get to a point of where we will be able to cycle. I know we will, because for the whole Kieran Cuff, Regina Doherty bill, the cycling, the distance, passing distance bill, although it wasn't successful, and I knew it wouldn't be, because with a legal background, I believe that the emphasis...
You think I opposed it?
No, I didn't. I didn't oppose it. No, I opposed it on this basis, Rich. It's still there. People have a much greater awareness of it, but as a law it would just end up in the courts, and it would make people twice as frustrated.
In America, it's in use in Australia, people are convicted.
Listen, we've got a different legal system, Rich. If you don't know the legal system, this is why I don't want to argue about it.
Well, what harm could it have done?
Because what would happen is it would end up about proof and evidence, and what would subsequently happen is
Verona, it would have put down a marker.
You wouldn't. The marker's there.
You mightn't have seen loads of people prosecuted.
I think the marker's there, and I think what we need to do is this.
The number of times.
Do we want a solution or
we definitely want. But the number of times, and I'm sorry, let's categorise here. Buses and taxi drivers. Now, obviously not all of them, but buses and taxi drivers routinely go too close to you when you're cycling.
There's no
most private cars are careful enough.
And how would you prove it? Just tell me. You say it to me. Yeah, but you.
Well, I mean, for example, we've CCTV all over Dublin. If there was an accident, it would be really easy to get CCTV saying
not from a distance. You don't know whether.
Of course you could.
Well, I am telling you.
You can pinpoint things from 300 yards.
Our legal system is entirely different to what the UK's is. Yes, we're in common law.
So if you take the way we think about cycling in Ireland, so right, for cyclists,
that's the point
here's a law that's used everywhere else. It's been proven to work in Australia. It's been proven to work in America. Can I just let me talk a sec? In the UK, it's used. Police regularly prosecute people for dangerous overtaking because it's one of the hardest things. Because not only when a car is overtaking a cyclist dangerously, a lot of the time they move out into traffic dangerously. So they're frustrated. They're trying to get past, but in reality, they just need to wait and be patient behind it. So that's the level of the debate we're at.
So what do you do about the law in Australia that says it's mandatory to wear a helmet?
Well, people say,
be fair then. Be fair.
So helmet wearing. So they brought in a law in Australia and said you have to be mandatory to wear a helmet. The numbers of people cycling drop.
This is the problem.
Safety decrease.
People stop cycling.
So I just back from Copenhagen. Everyone, I'm going to say it about 10 times today, but everyone there, about 1 in 10 people wear a helmet, and
it's
about 1 in 100 is dressed in anything else other than their normal clothes, and they're just cycling around, nice and steady, getting from where they want to go, commuting happy as Larry, as far as I can see.
Sorry, one other thing on that. And they reckon in Denmark, every kilometre you cycle instead of drive, you're saving the Danish taxpayer €1. So every kilometre.
Okay. And you're saying we spend €1.50.
No, we spend €1.50. That's the balance.
Let me come in on that point, because that's the positivity. That's the positivity. Helmets being mandatory, we can go back to. The positivity is there's a solution. And the solution is that people's attitudes need to change. Copenhagen wasn't always like that. Amsterdam wasn't always like that. It is today.
The solution is to prosecute people who
hold on a sec. That's not what happened in those countries. That is not what happened. They put the infrastructure in that they're prosecuted for not wearing helmets because it's mandatory. What you said was, well, it has worked.
Do you think wearing a helmet should be mandatory?
Yes, I do. That's not for the
surely you would recognise that if somebody's hit by one of your hauliers, a helmet ain't going to be worth a damn to them.
Well, put it this way, Nathan, you can look at that two ways. It's certainly nothing you can do if they're not wearing one. We don't know, because every individual action should be. An accident of that nature, doesn't matter if it's truck, car, bus or pedestrian, it should be investigated fully so that we know what the reason was.
People should wear helmets.
I want to get back to the point.
People should wear helmets. I'm not sure you can force people. If it's going to lead to a reduction in cycling,
I'll tell you why you shouldn't force people to wear helmets. You're in a situation where you're trying to increase the number of people cycling. One of the most successful ways we have of introducing people who might never have cycled before to cycling in Dublin is the city bike scheme.
Yeah.
A lot of people there, they might jump off a bus and they suddenly realise, I can get a Dublin bike from here down to there. If you had to have a helmet to that, you wouldn't have a helmet with you. You wouldn't do it.
I think that's true.
If you put obstacles in the way of people cycling, less people will do it.
Is it mandatory in Copenhagen up to an age? Is it mandatory in Copenhagen?
The best way to get safety for cycling is critical mass. A high number of cyclists, where there's a presence on the road, where this argument of we didn't see you becomes null and void, where this argument of we couldn't get past you becomes null and void, because there's more cyclists than there are cars. That critical mass, you only get that by not putting obstacles in the way of cycling. Well, mandatory helmet wearing is, and that's why it's not law.
We come back to the point that I was going to make with Shane, the attitude. If the person in the car were to be aware that each time they see a cyclist, that's a car less on the road, which is 3 metres long, there's less traffic because of those cyclists. Get it into your head that the more cyclists we see, the less traffic we have to deal with, the less climate change, or the less CO2 emissions we have. It's good. But we have got to come to a place where there's a mutual respect, a mutual understanding, and there has to be education on all sides.
But does the mutual respect need to come on your side?
Of course.
Is there respect from truck drivers towards cyclists?
Because I think some of them are abysmal. Absolutely. I have seen videos. It's atrocious the way some truck drivers will deal with it. Equally motorists and equally cyclists. Like when a cyclist gives you the 2 fingers, it isn't helpful. When the truck driver stays,
when the cyclist gives you the 2 fingers, you're not going to crash your lorry. When a lorry driver essentially tries to run you off the road, who runs up right behind you, he's going to cause you serious damage.
There is an element. I am not defending anybody that does that. Of course, that's despicable. But that's what I'm saying. We need to educate. And look, in that instance, you will find now that most trucks have cameras, most vehicles have cameras, and most cyclists. We are educating our drivers that they need to be cyclist aware, that they, of course, they do a part in their test one way or the other. But equally, I think that we do have to come to a place where the cyclist has to prove that they understand the rules.
I think as well, to go back to one of the questions you said at the start, and about, you know, cyclists needing to behave. I actually think part of the problem at the moment is it's almost like a pitch battle out there for road space. We're all fighting for that road space, whether you're a cyclist or a motorist. I think if you had a proper system of dedicated cycleways, I think that would go. I think cyclists, and I think you'd see cyclists going, okay, you know what, we have it. It's actually not legitimate for me to break a red light. And cyclists do break red lights, there's no question about it. And they go down. I went down a one-way street on a bike on my way in here today.
But what about in the country, Shane? Like, that's grand for the urban cyclist, but I mean, in the country you've got different cohorts of cyclists. You've got the few who will cycle to work their short distance to the local
I think
shop.
it's hairy. I think it's more hairy cycling in the country at times and cars drive too fast. That's the reality.
Oh yeah, I mean, look,
is the reality.
I think the reality, we only experienced it last night. You've got an 80 kilometre speed limit. People think they can drive at 80 kilometres. That's the maximum.
88 they think they can drive. They add 10% thinking it'll be okay.
The whole point is, again, it's about education, and I mean, it has to come from all sides. If you're in the country, and this is a fact, many of the lines or of the roads are not white lined, meaning that there isn't a centre white line. If you come from an urban area to the country, it's very difficult to get used to that, and we know that in the country. That sounds like a criticism. It isn't, it's a fact. So at all times, like, you'd love to bring the kids out on a Sunday for a cycle in the country. You really have to think about it.
You would.
Number one, I would never bring them without a helmet. Number two, I would very much choose my route. And number three, if it was possible to put the bikes in the back of the Jeep or a car or a van and say, right, let's go to Kendia Park, I would do that.
Hang on a second.
Very sad.
What you just said there that's crazy. The cyclists are allowed out on the road. They're a normal part. They're a vehicle, and they're a normal part of traffic. To suggest that there's something odd about bringing a child out for a cycle on a rural road is to suggest that cycling is not a normal behaviour.
It's more unnerving, isn't it?
Which in turn kind of entitles motorists to treat cyclists as somehow not normal. It's a very dangerous debate to have. The fact is, if you come across a cyclist on a rural road, as a driver, you have a duty of care to the vulnerable.
Richie, I'm not just talking about the motorist. I'm talking about, but I'm talking about visibly being able to see the cyclist because of the hedging.
I'm sorry, but this has to be put to bed as well. Cyclists are they're tall, they're normal-sized people, and they're on a machine. If you cannot see a bicycle in broad daylight,
I said because of the hedging.
Because of a
surely if there's an
you're
issue
travelling
with hedging,
too fast.
they should be travelling far slower. Exactly.
No, look, that's not the point. Travelling far slower at 50 kilometres in the country, and you come around a bend where the hedging is 2 foot more than it should be, and you meet a cyclist who's probably 2 foot out from the hedge.
Let a pedestrian there.
Verona, I've never come around. I've never come around a corner. Like if you're coming around a corner where you can't see around the corner, you need to be driving slow enough that you can stop at any point.
50k would be slower.
Well, I don't think you should be going. Going around a bad bend at 50 kilometres an hour.
Well, unfortunately, lads, look at, as far as I'm concerned, that these are the issues. It's not defence.
I was with you up until that point. If you're now in a situation where you're saying, you know what, you have to be able to go around the corner at 50 kilometres an hour. I mean, that's crazy stuff.
No, from my first point,
we need to slow down.
Yes. From my first point, when the signage says 80 kilometres and people actually think that's the speed limit, they think that 50 kilometres then is appropriate. They're not allowing, Shane or Richie, they're not allowing for the cyclist. They're not allowing for the pedestrian.
We can't allow a situation where the only way you can bring a child for a cycle is to pack up a car, drive the car with its emissions and all that stuff to a park, and then cycle around.
But Richie, I'm being honest. I wouldn't bring my daughter on a country road.
Most people wouldn't.
Yeah,
but better enforcement of the laws, an overtaking law, which you guys fought against, reduced speeds by drivers, and better facilities for cyclists. It's not rocket science. We just do what other countries have done.
Right. So everybody thinks there's an entitlement, and everybody feels that entitlement differently.
No, so there is an entitlement, surely, for people to get on their bike and go for a cycle with no helmet, with no high-vis gear, with not checking that.
Why do you say they're entitled to go with no helmet?
Because
That's like,
the law.
can I drive my car without a seatbelt?
No, because the law is you have your seatbelt on.
The whole point
the law
is
is not that you wear a helmet.
Why do I wear the seatbelt? Why do I wear it, Shane?
Why don't you wear a helmet when you drive?
Because I wear a seatbelt.
Do you have roll bars and a fire extinguisher?
But hold on, now,
Are
look,
trucks wrapped
Richie,
in bubble wrap? Because that would reduce a lot of
Well,
incidents.
the whole point about this is I can't take away the vulnerability of the cyclist.
A cyclist isn't vulnerable. The only thing a cyclist is vulnerable to in the situations you're describing is the behaviour of a driver or a motorist.
And you think, so basically your answer to it is that every driver is going to improve. So the bad cyclists are just going to go voomp. The bad cyclists, the ones that weave in and out cars, that do all the things that we complain about drivers doing, Rich, you think that's all going to stop?
Cyclists are allowed to move up.
So our cyclists, are they absolutely...
It's called filtering.
So there's no problem with cyclists then, there's no ignorant cyclists like there is truck drivers, there's no problem.
No, I didn't say that. There's plenty.
Well, is it not better to come at it from the perspective that we can all improve our behaviour? Can we all improve our behaviour?
This is not an argument. You can't argue, I once saw a cyclist break a red light, therefore they shouldn't have facilities and they shouldn't have people respecting them in the road and they shouldn't have... It's like, I hear that argument all the time. I once saw a cyclist break a red light.
Verona, would you accept this? When a driver makes an error, it affects more than just the driver. When a cyclist makes an error, the person it affects is him or her.
I'll tell you what I accept, Shane. I accept that sometimes... Of course it's... But you have to be personally... You must understand what's happening on the road.
Yeah, of course.
So, I mean, if you've never...
The helmet argument is a little bit of a red herring.
No, I do not. No, I wouldn't go there. I don't believe that. What Richie is failing to tell you that in Copenhagen, is it mandatory for the child up to 10 to wear the helmet? Well, it actually is in most of the jurisdictions.
I don't think most people would argue kids under 10 should wear a helmet.
Yeah. Well, Shane, you keep changing your mind. What's the difference?
I haven't changed my mind once.
You just said that. Why should it be mandatory? Why is it mandatory?
For adults. I'm saying I don't know any parent would let their kid under 10 out without a helmet on their bike.
But you've got to say to yourself, look, the solution is about education of us all. It's about education to stop the frustration levels, such as if the truck driver is actually unable to see for whatever reason, it is a bigger vehicle. Okay? Can you not see that the cyclist needs to be educated to what the driver's doing? And how do we do that, Richie? It's how do we do that?
We need cycle education for kids in school, and it should be an option for adults. As we pointed out before, most adult cyclists are motorists themselves. They
but in the case where they're not.
So I think we could introduce that training, absolutely, and it would be brilliant, because going down the inside of a truck, turning left, is not a good idea. It's not great for the truck driver, and it's certainly not good for the cyclist. And I would never do that cycling. I'd always move out onto the right. So yes, we do need driver education stuff, but we need to move away. We need to look at best practice, and we need to move the debate on to far more advanced debate of how do we design junctions so it's impossible for a cyclist to end up down the inside of a truck. How do we design cities so as it's possible for children to cycle, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds to start cycling back into school. And if the debate is, helmets should be mandatory, when in fact all the research and all the findings show, and this is the reason why none of these countries have mandatory helmet wearing, is because it reduces the number of cycling.
There's bigger issues
and ultimately
But just before we move on to the bigger issue then of maybe the public policy towards cycling in this country, like whatever happens, it's probably not going to be 5, 10, 20 years away till we get anywhere near where a city like Copenhagen is, that Dublin can get to that level.
Why does it have
just because the public policy at the moment is that they're not looking to invest the sort of money required. I'm not saying they should.
No, I know you're not, but I actually think it'll happen quite quickly. I think we've come to the point, particularly in Dublin, and I think in sort of Galway, Cork as well, where there's no more room for cars. I actually think we're getting to that point, and I think quite quickly, and I think Bus Connects offers a massive opportunity, and if we miss this opportunity, then it will take 20 years. Bus Connects offers us a real opportunity to redesign the main arterial routes into Dublin, and to say cyclists are as important as bus users and drivers, and that is a huge opportunity.
One of the things they've done with Bus Connect, though, is they put circuitous routes for cyclists. So the bus and the car go straight on in, and the cyclist goes anywhere and everywhere around through housing estates and out the other side and down side roads and everything. When in fact, like the design needs to move to the point where cyclists and pedestrians are number one if you're thinking, and cars and trucks are last after public transport.
Look, I'd love to know who was consulted you see, this is where I'm coming from. I'm not sure who gets consulted. Like, have people who cycle been consulted in that? Because I'm sure they objected if they did.
They're in the process of objecting.
Yeah, and you see, this is the point. So that delays it. That means they should have been consulted first, not last. I agree with what you're saying. I think we could be there quicker, but I think that in order, all of the infrastructure is going to take time. I think a proper ad campaign, like I said, Kieran Cuff's bill and Regina Doherty, I commended them greatly for wanting to do something, and I think it brought a huge amount of awareness. Now, Richie,
Lord, make me chase, just not yet.
No. I think the fact is that the ad campaign is there. You have the distance passing, you've got it. Whether it's low or not, people are aware.
That would have set down some marker, I think, to say to people, you know what, you have to treat cyclists with respect.
I leave my house.
I accept it would have been problematic.
That is part of it. It's part of it.
And from my house to the front gate of the Phoenix Park in Castleknock, it's about a mile and a half. And there's a bit where the road narrows, and within that bit, every car that passed me is too close to me. Literally 4, 5, 6, 7 cars out of 10 are in breach of, you know.
But you see, I'm going to ask you something now, and this is about the law, and this is where my point is. If you go out to Donnybrook this minute and you're in the cycling lane, and I'm minding my own business in the car lane, I'm breaching that law. I'm driving along beside you. You have a proper cycle lane.
It doesn't apply to cycle lanes in other countries. It just applies to situations.
I'm talking about the passing distance. You don't even have that distance. But my point is that you don't even have that distance. How dangerous is it?
Yeah.
How dangerous is it? Those cycle lanes that are encompassed in the bus lane, the bus stops and the cyclist comes out around the bus. They should be somebody should say, please don't use them for the moment.
So say on the M11 road where there's 2 lanes for traffic, a bus lane, and then the bike lane is along the footpath. Yeah. If tomorrow the local authorities said, we're going to remove one of those car lanes and make it a cycle lane on the road wide enough for 2 bikes, a bus lane and a car lane, would the road haulers object to that?
The difference is, I couldn't say that we'd object. We'd have to look at how it would actually impact. I mean, you've got to understand, we're not a huge percentage of traffic in the city. We're not. Everybody seems to think we are, but we actually avoid the city like the plague. You have smaller trucks doing deliveries. Now, you could possibly bring in vans, but for every small truck would have to be replaced by about 3 vans to take the cargo. So there's those considerations. Now, my whole agenda is, we will move to electric vehicles in the cities, and that's going to pose a problem of its own because you can't hear them. It's the same as not having a bell on your bike. I mean, we all think, have you a bell on your bike? I'm only asking the question now. Right. It's a legal requirement. And it's essential. It is. This is the point. It's just one of those things that if you've got some pedestrian walking out in front of you, they're on their mobile phone, you ring your bell and it avoids an accident.
A fine set of lungs for them as well.
But you see, Richie, there's an awful lot to be known. There's a huge amount that the cyclist knows that they're doing to avoid being injured, that the motorist doesn't understand.
But there's a huge frustration, I think, particularly in Dublin, towards professional drivers. That, okay, motorists in single cars will do stupid things and you're always wary that someone's going to open their door. It's the truck drivers, the bus drivers, the taxi drivers who are in a permanent rush, who are right up your backside as you're going down a single lane, who have the bus stop 100 metres in front and will swerve out and pull in right in front of you. You need to pull out. What sort of education are you giving to your drivers around cycling and around protecting cyclists?
Absolutely huge. Protecting the cyclists is protecting themselves. Who wants to be responsible for a road death? Absolutely nobody. I mean, it's a harrowing thing. Nobody, to my mind, goes out, well, nobody that I represent goes out to kill a cyclist. I mean, these 15 deaths didn't all happen in the city. You know, you've got, whether we like it or not, infrastructure in the country that just doesn't bode well, and there's always someone wrong and at fault. That's the awful thing. But we should try to, at all times, educate one another.
There is an issue, though. You're right. There is an issue about people who drive for a living. I think they are less respectful of cyclists than the private driver, the private car. That's my experience. I don't have statistics to back it up, but it's definitely
I would like to say and think that they're to a minimum, but I don't know that. I mean, look, we make huge representation, particularly around children, around schools, where you see signage that there's most likely, if you see a school sign, right, it's likely that you're going to meet a child on a bicycle. It's likely you might meet an adult with a cargo bike that's carrying a child. You have got to realise these signs. Stop the transient driving where everybody just thinks, you know, I have to be honest, I'm quite a competent driver, and around the 6-7 o'clock time in Dublin City, I get wary and I'm afraid. You know, I'm doing my 30k because I know that at least no matter what happens, I'm driving cognizant, but like there are that many cyclists.
Yeah,
it is difficult.
Not enough people are like this. Actually, it's a good thing to be wary.
It's of course it is, and I think the problem is that the infrastructure isn't there for the cyclist other than to be in the car lane.
Richie, one other thing we
are allowed to be in the car lane.
Of course they are. Everybody's entitled to the road. Everybody.
Nathan, one other thing we haven't mentioned, you asked at the start, is Ireland a good place to be a cyclist? Not if you're a woman. The statistics for women cyclists, 30% of cyclists in Ireland are women. That compares to about 50%, as you would expect, say, in European cities. Now, why is that?
Well, we have a cycling club with 20 members, and it's half and half.
Yeah, but I'm talking about people who are on the road, who are commuting. 30%.
Okay. Because they're not as willing to...
Because, well, you know why it is? I think it's because women have more common sense than men, and they are more aware of danger. They're more aware of danger, and they look at this and go, you know what? It's a jungle out there. I'm not going to go into that jungle.
Yeah,
I think that's the reason.
I don't know. I mean, look at it. It's like when we talk about the sportives.
More people cycling to increase safety. It's this thing of, you know, there's so many cyclists. You just said you do 30k because there's so many cyclists. You need to give them that space. Exactly. So what we need is more cyclists to increase safety. The more cyclists, there'll just be such a presence on the road.
Yeah, but
I have no
chicken and egg, which comes first, Richie?
No, don't. I think it is.
We're close to pushing.
What we're discussing is, like you said, the 30 kilometre, you were asking the question, should that be increased? Absolutely not in an urban area, particularly for trucks, because that is one safeguard, that if that is maintained and there are accidents, damage is minimalised, and that's an awful way to put it, but that is the fact that you in urban areas, that's the only speed limit that can be, you know, that as a maximum, not as, you know, something to be achieved, but as a maximum. So, and I think again, we have to start to educate. We have to have campaigns. We have to make people aware that, I suppose we've got to have this thing that there's no one motorist or cyclist has more of an entitlement. The road is for us all, and we need to respect one another.
We need to enforce the laws as well.
Yeah, as well, absolutely. But where we don't want to live in a nanny state, we want to do it by consent. We want to be able to say, my child is going to cycle to school, as I'm a father, mother, brother, sister. Respect that child on its bike, let them get to school safely, and the motorist should never be in a hurry. That's the awful thing. They should never ever be in a hurry. They should be driving at all times, aware of their surroundings. And being in a hurry is never a good thing in a motor car or in a truck.
You're just back from Copenhagen. Generally,
again.
Has he mentioned that?
Did you have a nice time?
It was lovely.
Was it enjoyable? Did you do anything except just watch cyclists going by?
I went to theme parks and stuff.
In all. Generally in Copenhagen, the cyclists are separated from the other road users.
Yeah.
They have much wider streets there. Much wider streets, actually, than we have. But
is it simply a case, when you look at what's happened in Dublin and how dangerous it feels being on a bike, that we'll never have a situation whereby it feels okay to be a cyclist sharing a road with cars, with trucks, with buses in Dublin? Is for you, do we have to build separate bike lanes?
I'm happy sharing road space with but again, as I said, I'm 43. I'm male, and I'm not.
Been doing it for 25 years.
If you were to try and create something to say, you know, the safest for people, I'm not the average person. You know, you have to take into fact the inexperienced cyclist, the elderly, and the younger people. Plus, you know, female cyclists or whatever. I'm not drawing a difference between female and everything. But to increase the number of females, there has been surveys to show that if you want to get more people cycling, the way to do it is to make them feel safer about it.
Yeah.
And
the answer is yes. The answer
because the
answer
thing about Copenhagen, you do hear people say they have wider streets, and they definitely do have wider streets. But where the streets aren't wide,
they're still prioritised.
Still have prioritised.
Yeah. Look, you can have as much enforcement of the law. All those things are important. Education is important.
It still boils
until we have it's more than that. Until you have dedicated, segregated bike lanes, there's going to be a problem, and you will not get to the kind of numbers you're getting in other European cities.
And the awful thing thing is we do have them, but they're totally inadequate. They're actually
they're not segregated.
You also have to put cycling design.
Painted white lines.
You also have to put cycling design into requirements. We just recently we put the Lewis tracks around the side of Trinity, and I don't know if you've ever cycled there, but there's actually nowhere to cycle. You end up having to cycle
on the
Lewis things, or try and force your way outside of it into a really thin lane. That was designed just recently. And there was no thing given to cyclists. We've loads of railway tracks with no cycling facilities beside them. In Canada and things now, if you're doing a project for a railway track, you have to put in cycling facilities. It's just part of it. And not only that, someone comes along and goes, that's not good enough. This is the way you have to do it. So we have to move to the point that this just becomes the first thing. And you see cyclists are banging their head against the wall. We're quite an active group now on social media, and we're all sharing ideas in terms of what's safe, what's not. There was one been put in Limerick there, and it's too narrow, and you can look at it and you can see it's too narrow. It was also raised very high, and it's right beside the road. So if someone falls off that, they're out in front of a car, and it's just you're kind of wondering at what point do we just look at best design somewhere and simply copy it?
So, Rich, can I ask, are you only cycling for work, or do you cycle as a sports
as well?
Right, because we were just discussing this last night, and the sportives, there's no helmet, no cycle on all of the up-and-coming sportives. No helmet, no cycle, right? Now, that's why, if we were to listen to this tomorrow, you probably think we're all only talking about Dublin. We're not. It is a huge activity in the country. Where I live, the surface is the biggest issue in relation to cycling. It's the biggest issue, but to get to the mainland or to the main road where the surface is good, you're taking it's dangerous.
I'd put it to you, that's not the biggest issue. I'd put it to you, the biggest issue is speed. The speed of drivers. That's the biggest issue.
Well, I suppose
I'd be nervous cycling along some of our rural roads, because cars bomb along at 50 and 60 miles an hour. And if you're a cyclist, you're just hoping they don't take their eye off the road.
Well, can I just ask, what do you think is the solution to that?
I'm not sure what the solution is, because I don't think it's realistic to have cycle lanes along every rural road.
No, not in rural Ireland.
I don't think that is realistic.
Either, no.
Look, the solution is for people to slow down.
They built motorways everywhere, and after they were finished the motorways, they were left with main roads that used to be the main roads between, say, like in the M7, there's the old N7 is just inside that.
Yeah.
And the plan was to redesign that to allow for safe cycling. It's just never done.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
well, we'd have leisurely cycles like the Dungarvan, and we are looking at extending from Rosslare to Waterford now, which would be fantastic, but that still doesn't cater for those who are going out in cycling clubs.
Yeah. The cycling clubs and things, they do wear helmets because they're in groups, and your average speed is 30k. Yeah. For me to get to work, my average speed is 10, 12 kilometres an hour, and I'm just cruising along. That's why I prefer not to wear a helmet in that scenario, because literally you're going out the door. If you were to do what people suggest cyclists should do, you'd be dressed as some kind of
Molly.
Between a construction worker and some kind of MMA.
You're too old for
the club last night told me that they would expect that every bike should have a flashing light. Okay, every bike should have a flashing light, and there are ones that are out now fair. That can be charged for 5 hours. Yeah. They do all expect that there should be high visibility, particularly on rural roads, that there should be high visibility, that you can see them at a distance. So, and then the other thing is a bell. And the reason for that is particularly that if there's somebody walking in the country and they don't hear you coming, that you just give a ring of the bell. Now, I know you say you'd shout, but that might make them jump, whereas the ring of the bell, funnily enough...
Sounds a bit ruder, all right,
It's politer, but it's also, you kind of don't jump. But look, it's to me, and I really, really think it's so important. I really think that we need an ad campaign that is there. Yes, the laws will come, I believe they will, but the problem is that you still have the cyclist who will suffer no imposition from the law. There is nothing that you can say to the cyclist. He doesn't have a licence.
But we also need to end these constant arguments. So, for example, one you get on all the time is bloody cyclists cycling two abreast.
There's a reason
cycling two abreast is what's recommended. And the reason is because the group are easier to see as cyclists, but more importantly, it takes less time to overtake a group of cyclists cycling two abreast than it would if they were all in a single line.
And yet when you do it, when I cycle outside my daughter, for example, just to protect her,
the hoot of the
invariably.
But that debate is over. But we keep having it. Like, it's finished.
Well, then is advertising education?
Why is that debate over?
I mean, that's something for education.
Practice is cycle two abreast.
Most people don't know that. That's the point.
But
most cyclists know it.
That's a job for education.
People in the country think that they're being frustrated when you come out two abreast, that they're thinking, look at this fella now, he doesn't want me to overtake. The reality is he's doing it to protect himself, to stop in certain instances overtaking.
The onus is on people as well, to like the education that we talked about in terms of cyclists learning, it goes both ways. The motorists, that's another factor we could put into the learning process of driving, how to interact with cyclists. That would be pretty helpful.
And as you said at the start, that it is legitimate for a cyclist to slow you down. That you shouldn't be angry because you come around and you have to wait 2 minutes before you can overtake a cyclist. I'm sorry, that's just part of being on the road.
I absolutely agree, and that is about attitude. That's about attitude and education to that attitude. Look, 25 years ago, people thought driving home from the pub after a few drinks was acceptable. You had 2 will do after that. Now you have zero tolerance. And I think that's where we're aiming for. We need education, mutual respect and understanding. And you will get there.
We know that the Irish Road Haulage Association are good lobbyists.
Yes.
Have cycling got a good lobby group? Because I'm just, we're talking about infrastructure, looking at the figures. Department of Transport in 2015 spent almost 19 million euro on cycling infrastructure. That halved to 10.5 in 2016, fell a further 7 million in 2017. We're talking about dramatic changes to the structure of Dublin City, of Cork City, of Galway City to make space for these cycle lanes. Yet if they're consistently cutting funding, and
if you're spending 7 million quid, forget about it. We have to invest in this. We have to. It's as with most things, it actually comes down to spending money. Whether it's spending money on promotional campaigns, safety campaigns, but most importantly, spending money on infrastructure. I have no faith in this government to do that. Zero faith in this government to do it. I don't think they.
The RSA have 20 million sitting there. And are you telling me that money shouldn't be used on a campaign? This Liffey cycle route is going to cost 20 million. And there's a bank of money there. PIAB just gave back 17 million because it's a bank of money. And you're right, we can do with more cyclists in the Dáil and people who don't just cycle but drive also.
The cycling campaigns are voluntary as well. So, I mean, you almost need a standard, a cycling standard national office. So if you're doing a project, you have to run it by them and they go, well, no, that's not. We need requirements for cyclists put into law and into planning that aren't debatable.
What about
and the standard then? The standard needs to be the same. At the moment, what we're getting is kind of a hodgepodge of different. Like no two cycle lanes are the same.
But Rich, what do you suggest for cyclists who will say, you're talking about making it all equal and the entitlement is there for everybody. What do you suggest that makes the motorist less frustrated or feeling more entitled than the cyclist? Do you suggest that the cyclist should have to undergo the rules of the road, for instance, pass a theory test? Do you think it would help?
I think you're coming at this in the wrong way.
No.
Because you're saying this, the cyclist isn't the problem if the motorist is frustrated. The motorist is the problem. The motorist needs to cop on.
But hold on, Shane.
You're coming at for education, but nothing that puts obstacles in the way of
And that's
of
why I'm asking, because I believe from the perspective of the truck driver can do so much. But if, God forbid, a cyclist comes up on the inside, that cyclist gets killed. The cyclist has had no awareness, possibly, that the driver was going to do with you. So how do you cure that? You can educate this driver to the best of your ability because you know he's going to be driving that and he's got to pass. By the time he gets to that truck, he has passed 4 tests, but it doesn't stop the cyclist. Now, our club brought Cycling Ireland down. Our club brought Cycling Ireland down, and we paid to sit in a class.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, do we make that something that's available?
We don't. Oh yeah, training for people, safety training is brilliant.
Well, they do it.
We can do it through schools.
They do it in schools now.
And adults can go back and do it. Mandatory stuff. people talk about, penalty points for cycling, insurance, number plates. That's all crazy stuff. That's not going to increase the number of people cycling, which in turn is not going to lead to an increase in safety. We talked before about unworkable laws, one that's actually working in other countries, but these ones are completely unworkable. Like, I have 4 bikes. Do I have to get 4 number plates? How big do they have to be? Where do I have to put them?
But I'm
where do I put my license?
There seems to be no onus either. And I'm not looking for an argument. I'm looking to understand that you feel there's no onus except that you're entitled to use the road.
No, I have to abide by the rules of the road as well. And
but how do we know that you know the rules of the road? From a motorist perspective is all I'm saying.
But how do you know anyone knows the rules of the road?
Well, if you're a motorist and you have a licence, you have undertaken the theory test. You have some...
You've passed the driving test.
Passed the driving. Often 30 years earlier, or you might have got the amnesty in 1979. I mean, that's not... That's
again, it's about the solution.
It's not for the individual drivers to worry about what level of it's the guard's job to prosecute someone who's doing something dangerous.
Richard,
all individual drivers need to do is do their own bit properly.
So why aren't they doing it, Richie? Why aren't they doing it so? If it's as simple as that.
Well, all individual drivers need to do is give a cyclist space and time. And if
but this is coming back to the point I made here. Are you saying they aren't doing that because cyclists are acting the maggot? No. See, I think that's coming from the wrong perspective.
I think it's not the wrong perspective. It is about attitude. And it is very...
And the attitude is, it's our road and cyclists are lucky to be on it. That is the attitude.
Well, that's the attitude we need to get rid of. That's my point. Yeah. And it's equally the attitude that if there is some level playing field whereby everybody that's on the road is entitled to use it, should we not all be on it at some level? That we're all on it in the same level.
No. The rules of the road are designed.
The attitudes aren't going to change.
I'll tell you.
The attitudes of drivers aren't going to change. What we have to do is remove the cyclist from sharing the road.
Nathan, this is something that actually would. It's so simple and it's mind-boggling. The other day there were 2 French tourists walking in the country on the wrong side of the road. Why? Because they came from France and it would be to them. So instead of facing the traffic as they're walking parallel with the traffic. Do you understand my point?
Yeah. But you're always going to get cases of people making mistakes and making errors.
Well, but we have to try and minimise that. But their attitude when we stopped and told them was they just crossed the road and thought, thank you for telling us. I mean, one way or the other, everybody doesn't just know. And as motorists, we don't just know that the cyclist is too abreast because they're not trying to frustrate you and keep you back. They're too abreast because they know it's safe to keep you back. But the motorist should be able to readily understand that.
Should the motorist not have to cop on that if a cyclist is cycling too abreast, they're not there having a laugh amongst themselves thinking, how can we frustrate the van driver behind us, who may ultimately end up killing us if he tries to take a risk to pass us?
But Nathan,
they're doing what's the safest thing for them. They're the one who's most at risk.
My point is that many motorists won't understand it. They won't understand it. They'll see the cyclist come from being individual to 2, and they'll think they're actually doing it to frustrate them. That's the level that's out there, believe you me. We have seen the videos, we have shown the videos to drivers, we've asked them, what do you think is happening here? It's incredible. It is incredible.
We are tight on time. I want to run through some of the messages and tweets we've been getting. We actually put up a tweet yesterday saying the panel was happening, and there was a photo with that showing 8 or 9 people out, I think, on their Sunday cycle. And Johnny Kinsella was in touch on Twitter saying, questions should be, are cyclists good for Irish roads? 8, maybe more cyclists in a picture on a busy road, yet not one of them wearing high-vis clothing. Is it a fashion parade or a cycle they're on? Does the RSA not have a campaign saying, be safe, be seen? When you're travelling on a road by either bike, car, walking, it's about making it safe for you and other road users. Again, be safe, be seen.
There was 8 cyclists in that picture, and they're all wearing cycling gear. And it's broad daylight, the sun is shining, and there's blue sky. If Johnny Kinsella is driving behind 8 cyclists in cycling gear on bikes on a day when it's broad daylight, and he thinks they need to be wearing high vis for him to see them,
but isn't it a pity?
Go to the Garda station.
Isn't
and
it a pity that
license.
you have to point that out? I mean, that's an attitude that I'm talking about changing. That is the problem.
That's fair. That is fair.
Like, I think that is awful to think that to me is someone who just has to moan, because the reality is they're doing nothing wrong, but his attitude is wrong. Doesn't matter what way you come at it, his attitude has to change.
Donny Keown on Instagram. Cycling here is extremely dangerous, getting worse by the week. I cycle regularly and consider myself a safe/good cyclist. I try to be as considerate as I can to other road users, but I say a little prayer every time I get home safely. Unfortunately, it's only a matter of time before I'm injured by a motorist. I feel, cycling to work most days, that's the attitude of most cyclists. Is it feels as though it's only a matter of time before somebody opens their car door, before you go through that pothole in the middle of the bike lane and you go flying, before one of the cars that's parked in the bike lane suddenly pulls out in front of you. It does feel as though...
That's why the message like, had to be the way, like, no motorist wants to hit a cyclist. Like, they clearly don't want to do that. And the only way to make sure that doesn't happen is patience and time and space. Give the cyclist space. Take your time and be patient with them. And you don't.
Well, that patience is in short supply.
In urban conditions, in particular in city centre driving, you don't need to overtake the cyclist, because you will pull up at the red light literally
same time
200 metres down the road, and the cyclist will just come up along on your instant, and you start the ball rolling all over again.
But again, if you put a positive spin on what Richie is saying, is that at least if you have a cyclist, he's beside you. If each cyclist became a car, they're in front of you, and you are reducing the actual traffic. For the commuter who has to have a car for whatever reason, they can appreciate that the cyclists are not in their way.
But is the problem that actually the statistics don't bear that out, that cycling in Dublin seems to have stagnated numbers-wise because people are so fearful?
It's amazing as well, though, what could be achieved through design. So a lot of people intentionally break red lights when they're on bikes because they don't feel safe waiting to go off at the same time as the traffic.
Yeah, I do. Every pedestrian crossing, if there's nobody crossing, I would go through the red light to get a head start.
Yeah, because you're at a standing.
Is that why we do it, though? We also do it because it's quicker.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're trying to get a head start on the traffic behind you.
So like in other areas, there's a green light for cyclists first.
So that's where ridicule comes from.
In certain areas, if you're cycling home as a cyclist, this is actually in Copenhagen, where I was actually in Copenhagen. When you're cycling home in Copenhagen, you get this thing called the green wave. So if you get one green light and you continue travelling at the same average speed, you will get green lights the whole way. Mm-hmm. And that's a design. So they've just gone, look, cyclists are more important than other road users. Cyclists and pedestrians are what we want to encourage. We need more of these, and they've just made design changes to benefit that. There's an argument as well that cyclists can mix it with pedestrians quite easily. So if you get to a red light, you could potentially turn left quite safely.
Which is what they do in Australia.
What they do in other areas.
Yeah.
But we don't even try these things here, you know.
I won't read out the 50 texts that say Richie should just feck off to Copenhagen if he likes it so much over there.
The beer is too expensive.
Yeah, that's for sure. Our Saturday panel today brought to you with thanks to welovecycling.ie, powered by Škoda. My thanks to Richie Oakley, to Verona Murphy and to Shane Coleman. Thanks a lot for coming in. I don't think we probably really scratched the surface to this.
No,
but
lots more to
we will come back to it again, and thanks for all the messages, and we will definitely touch on this. It's a hugely important topic. Thanks a lot for coming in, guys.
Cheers.
Join that conversation. Text us on 53106. Texts cost 30 cents.
It's your final chance to save this weekend on the new Harvey Norman Home Collection, with something for every room in the house, like sofas from only $389, dining tables from as little as $145, luxury fabric bed frames from just $379, and Irish-made mattresses from just $299. Choose styles and colours to suit your home and save with the Harvey Norman Spring Summer Home Collection. But hurry, sale must end Monday.
Go, Harvey, go!
In business, growth is everything. OnPost Commerce is a global expert